Well, welcome everybody. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge that we are gathered here today on the land of the Gadigal people, the Indigenous people, always was, always will be Aboriginal land. And I'd like to pay my respects, our collective respects, to elders past and present, and to warriors. The warriors past and present, warriors who have fought for freedom and justice on this land. Now when the white man came to this country, the Indigenous people of this country were horrified at the brutality of the invaders. When they watched the floggings, the public floggings that took place here, when they watched the executions and the public hanging up of the bodies of the people who were executed, they were horrified. They were horrified at what they saw. But the horror was to get worse, because the invaders then went on to steal their land, and in the process carried out numerous massacres. And in some of these massacres, particularly some of the famous ones like the Mile Creek Massacre, the invaders beheaded the Indigenous people. Correct, they beheaded them. So I mention this because this is the context. This is the, if you like, the public context in which a new raft of so-called security laws are being rushed through the parliament of this country right now as we speak. There was hysteria, a public hysteria manufactured about an imminent terrorist attack by the horrible ISIS or Islamic State jihadists who are in Iraq and Syria, fighting in Iraq and Syria, supposedly on Australia. And on the basis of this, they have been trying to rush through 3 lots of so-called security legislation to the federal parliament. One of these lots of legislation has already gone through. But I have to say, there's 3 lots of legislation, the last one of which will come through at the end of this year, actually includes the data retention provisions that we're here to protest against. These 3 lots of security legislation follow the introduction of 54 sets of so-called security anti-terrorist legislation since September 11 attack. These laws have been given the security police, ASIO, the intelligence agencies, the spies, the spooks, whatever you want to call it, incredible numbers of new powers. And there's a whole lot of lawyers who have pointed this out. These agencies now have the power to do just about anything. They have more power than they ever had before. They have more power than they need, and they have more power than it's safe to give any government agency in this country. And yet they want more. And how much more you can measure by the Attorney General's description of this last 3 lots of this new 3 lots of legislation as the biggest ever expansion of security powers since the 1970s. That means it's bigger than all the security laws between 1970s and the year 2001. And on top of that, there was those 54 other pieces of legislation. The first lot of legislation that went through recently, shamefully, with the support of the so-called opposition Labor Party, that rushed through, basically gave them the power with a single warrant to literally intrude upon the entire internet. A single warrant. The Attorney General said there is no limit on the number of networks or devices we can intrude, that ASIO can intrude into through the single warrant. No limit. Completely unlimited. He was asked over and over again in Parliament, is there a limit? Is it 50 or 100 or 200? He refused to give a number. He said there's no limit. There's no arbitrary limit. So theoretically, with a single warrant, they can go in and they can go into networks, they can go into computers, not only snoop on it, they can insert malware, they can do all sorts of things. They can put things in there that might destroy your information as well as spy upon you. So that was one big power that has already gone through. In addition, in this first set of legislation, they gave ASIO immunity from carrying out unlawful and illegal activities. As long as it didn't kill anybody, as long as it didn't cause severe damage, and under pressure, they had to add as long as it didn't involve torture. They didn't want to include that torture bit in there, which made people very, very suspicious, of course. But that is exactly what they were empowering ASIO to do. But no security agency should be allowed to stand above the law, surely. If the law applies to everybody, why should these agencies be above the law? Why should they be allowed to break the law? First question. It gives you an indication of what's coming down the line, doesn't it? It does give you an indication of what's coming down the line. The next lot of legislation, which is currently being discussed in Parliament, under a massive time pressure, there's so little time left for it that even the so-called parliamentary committee examining it admits it does not have the time to do a proper study of the full implications of this legislation. This legislation is the so-called foreign fighters legislation. It will give the government the power to criminalize people for simply being in a certain place anywhere around the world that's designated a no-go zone. If you happen to be in one of those no-go zones, the onus to prove that you're not there doing something wrong goes back on you. So the so-called presumption of innocence is out of the window simply because you've gone to a no-go zone. How do you get a no-go zone? It's very, very broad capacity for the Attorney General to just designate a no-go zone. Entire numbers of people are facing the prospect of being criminalized simply because of what country they may have originally come from, what country they might have family or friends or associates of any form. That second lot of legislation also is expected to give the government the power to ban organizations supposedly for advocating terrorism, loosely defined. So if we were to support in this country the fights of legitimate freedom fighters against a dictatorship, against foreign occupation, could that be construed as advocating terrorism? Will that mean that you will be banned as a result? So that's the second lot of laws that they are currently putting through Parliament. And the third lot of laws are the ones that are going to include the data retention. The famous statement by former NSA chief, former CIA director, Hayden, that metadata, we use metadata to kill people. We use metadata to kill people. We should never forget this statement. He said it on camera. It's on YouTube. You can look at it and just listen to him. Because they do use metadata now. They have collecting a massive amount of metadata all around the world, and they use it to target the drone attacks. The drone attacks that the United States carries out. This is extrajudicial execution. The thing that you cannot in any way justify. Somebody, the president has the right to have a look at the list in the morning and says, we'll kill X, Y, and Z. The metadata is collected, the drones are coordinated, secret installations all around the world, including in Australia, will help with the process of both the collection of this data and the targeting of the person, and the execution takes place. In the process, maybe 50%, maybe 40% of the people killed might be collateral damage. Children, innocent people gathering, standing in the wrong place at the wrong time. No one's held accountable for that. That's what metadata is about. It is a huge thing. They're trying to tell us it's nothing. It's just the envelope. It's just, oh, you know, what device connected another device. But with modern smart devices, your phone, the collection of metadata allows a security agency to find out almost everything. Not only who you made the phone call to, who your computer related to, but also where you were, what you bought, where you visited, everything. And on the basis of this, you can collect more information than any number of spooks going around with cameras and recording devices can. And today, there are already numerous institutions collecting this sort of data on us, and they know the power of it. let me give you an example of one institution that brags publicly of how much metadata they have collected. Coles. Coles is using its loyalty card to collect information about what you buy, what you consume, and they're going to then pass it over to their new insurance arm, which is going to use it to make an evaluation about whether they can lend you money, or if they lend you money, how much interest they have to charge you for it. So these institutions are already collecting metadata, and they know that metadata is not some small, incidental, doesn't matter thing. It is very, very, very powerful, just like this. It's got huge implications. It tells you a lot of things. And anyway, another excuse that the authorities are giving us for this data retention law, they say we already have access to your metadata, and indeed they do. And that's the problem. If this was a democratic society, if this was a sane society, what we would be doing now is working how to rein this in. If you are going to go and break into somebody's house and steal all their stuff, snoop on them, you are supposed to get a warrant. If the cops want to do it, that's what they're supposed to do. I'm not saying they do it all the time. Maybe they don't do it a lot of the time. But it should be their duty to at least get a warrant to do so. In this country, the authorities can get your metadata without a warrant. All they need is a simple authorization, and apparently there have been tens of thousands of authorizations, not just to the security agencies to snoop, and other government departments have gone and had a look at it. Social Security probably looks at your metadata. Who knows? Anybody can make an application and get it. So what the new laws do is they also want to consolidate this lawless area, this area of lack of regulation. We should be going the opposite direction, and what they want to do is compel the communications company to keep all that data in there so that the government can access it for at least 2 years. And that's what the law is about, and that's why it's very, very dangerous, and we have to oppose it. Well, finally, folks, I want to say we should oppose not just this lot of security legislation, the one with data retention. We should oppose the whole lot of them. They are an attack on the freedom of all. And we should not buy that argument that the government so blithely, so blatantly tries to sell to us. That is, for the sake of protecting our freedom, we have to sacrifice all our freedom. It's ridiculous. Thank you.